Hello. So today in our presentation, I'm going to discuss capital budgeting, or a topic which is also called as investment appraisals. So in this presentation, I will first explain the concepts and the definitions of various uh, aspects of capital budgeting, such as the process as well as evaluation techniques before moving into working out of the sums. So the process of capital budgeting, it is the process of planning investments in assets whose cash flows are expected to extend beyond 1 year. So capital budgeting is a process where we evaluate investments in assets of which the cash flows we expect to generate for more than 1 year. In other words, capital budgeting focuses on non-current assets of which cash flows will be generated for more than 1 year. It doesn't focus on the current assets. So the important aspects of capital budgeting, as I have explained, since the cash flows are expected to generate for more than 1 year, it has a long-term impact. Since there will be future cash flows, we need to convert the future cash flows into a present value. In other words, we need to consider time value of money, and also the initial investment is going to be quite substantial. Since the initial investment is going to be substantial, you need to find money to invest in the capital assets. So for this purpose, you may either decide to issue ordinary shares, issue preference shares, issue debentures, or take a bank loan. So there are basically two types of capital investment decisions: replacement decisions as well as expansion decisions. Now, a replacement decision means here we look at the possibility of replacing an existing machine with a new machine in order to continue the same operations. In expansion decisions, we are going to expand the operations by adding new machines or adding new assets to the existing asset line. So you can see the definition given for expansion decisions. Decisions will determine whether to purchase capital projects and add them to existing assets. As I told you, here we are trying to decide whether we should purchase new assets in order to add them to existing assets in order to enhance the capacity of the organization. So there are two types of projects. One such project is called independent projects, and the other project is called the mutually exclusive projects. Independent projects are independent projects are projects of which cash flows are independent of the outcome of another project. In other words, if there are two projects, let's say A and B, and if cash flows of A does not depend on the outcome of B, we say A is independent from B. On the other hand, if A and B are mutually exclusive, A's cash flows will depend on the outcome of B. Similarly, B's cash flows will depend on the outcome of A. So in that case, you can only select one project out of the two projects. That is why we call such projects as mutually exclusive projects. So it is the opposite of independent projects. You can see a set of projects where the acceptance of one project means the others cannot be accepted. In other words, if you accept one project, let's say project A, you cannot accept project B. In other words, project A's cash flows depend on what is going to happen to project B. From project A, you will generate cash flows, but that means you can't do project B. On the other hand, for you to generate cash flows from project B, you cannot accept project A. So the cash flows of one project depend on the outcome of another project. In other words, both projects are dependent on each other. Only one project you can select at a time. Those are called as mutually exclusive projects. So now let's look at the steps in the valuation process. When we evaluate capital investments, we have to first determine the purchase price or the cost of the asset. That is step number one. Step number two would be to estimate the future cash flows of the project. I told you earlier, when we invest in a capital asset, we generate cash flows for more than 1 year. So we need to estimate the future cash flows. That is step number two. Number three, we need to evaluate the riskiness of the project in order to identify the discount rate that we need to apply. As I told you, since we are generating future cash flows, those future cash flows we need to convert to present values. So to convert future cash flows to present values, we need to use a discount rate. This discount rate depends on the risk of the project. So based on the discount rate and the future cash flows, we can convert the future cash flows into present values. That is step number 4. Based on the calculated present values and also the initial investment, we can calculate the NPV of the project. That is step number 5. So let's now look at how shall we estimate the cash flows when we are doing an investment appraisal. What you have to understand is cash is a different concept to profits. There's a big difference between cash flows and profits. When we calculate profits, we consider non-cash expenses and also we do so many adjustments. But cash is very objective, not like profits. We say profit is subjective, but cash flows are objective. Why we say cash flows are objective? Because cash is something that we can count and verify. We can estimate the cash inflows and also the cash outflows. We will know exactly how much of cash we got in and how much of cash we have spent. So cash flows are very objective. That is something that you can verify. And also when we take cash flows for the investment appraisal, we need to take the cash flows after taxes. What you have to understand is for a particular project, you can estimate the cash inflows as well as cash outflows. But on these net cash flows, you have to calculate the tax liability if the company is liable to tax. And if there is a tax liability, you have to take the cash flows after tax. Also, you have to consider cash flows which are only relevant for the project. Why I say only relevant for the project? Because there can be certain cash flows which are not relevant for the project. So if there are certain cash flows which are not relevant for the project, such cash flows you should not consider. So I repeat, you have to understand the difference between cash flows and profits. Profits are subjective, cash flows are objective. Since profits are subjective, we don't consider profits for the investment appraisals. We do the investment appraisals based on the cash flows. And we take cash flows after taxes if the company is liable to pay tax. And also we consider only relevant cash flows. Why we say we consider only relevant cash flows? Because there can be in certain times irrelevant cash flows which we should not consider for the investment appraisal process. Remember, we do an investment appraisal to give a recommendation to the management whether to go ahead with the project or not. So to give a recommendation to the management whether to undertake an investment or not, we should only consider relevant cash flows. If there are irrelevant cash flows, we should not consider those. Mostly relevant cash flows are incremental cash flows. Incremental cash flows are the additional cash flows that are generated because of the project. In other words, because of accepting a project, if there are additional cash inflows, those cash inflows will be relevant. Similarly, because of the project, if there are additional cash outflows, those cash outflows will be relevant. So only we consider incremental cash inflows and incremental cash outflows as relevant cash flows of a project. Okay, let's now look at different types of cash flows that we will see when we are estimating the future cash flows of a project. And out of these cash flows, let's see which cash flows will be relevant and which cash flows will be irrelevant. There is a particular type of a cash flow called sunk cost or sunk cash flows. These are the cash flows or these are the costs that have been incurred with regard to a project in the past. Now, say for example, before purchasing a machine or before investing in a capital asset, if the company has done a previous research in order to see the viability, the cost incurred for that research will be a sunk cost and it will not be relevant for the capital appraisal process. These costs are not relevant because that cost has been incurred in the past. If it is to be incurred in the future, if that cost is going to happen in the future, then in that case that cost will be relevant. But since in this case the cost has already happened in the past, it will not be relevant. Such costs are called as sunk cost and those are irrelevant cash flows. Opportunity cost. Now this is what you are going to lose if you do an investment. Now say for example, if you want to undertake a particular investment or if you want to invest in a particular asset in order to generate future cash flows. And because of the same investment, if you are going to lose certain other cash flows, those are called as opportunity cost. These are, in other words, externalities. So these opportunity cost or externalities are relevant cash flows. So opportunity cost or externalities you need to include as relevant cash flows in a capital appraisal process. Shipping and installation cost. Now say for example, if the company is importing a particular machinery in order to invest in a new project, the shipping cost as well as installation cost with regard to this new machine will be relevant cash flows. In other words, the company will not be able to undertake new investment without this machine, which the company is currently importing. Therefore, the shipping cost of the machine as well as when it is brought into the country, the installation cost of the machine will be relevant cash flows. Inflation. If we are told that in the future, cash flows are going to change because of the country's inflation, then of course inflation will be a relevant factor which we need to include in the cash flow estimation. In other words, all the future cash flows we need to adjust for the inflation. If the question is silent or if the examiner doesn't say anything about inflation, then of course we can ignore about inflation. But if the examiner specifically says about inflation, then all the future cash flows, both inflows as well as outflows, we need to adjust for inflation. Not only cash flows, the discount rate also we need to adjust for inflation. When we adjust the discount rate for inflation, we call the discount rate as nominal discount rate. So the discount rate without inflation is called as real discount rate. Discount rate with inflation is called as nominal discount rate. So remember, if inflation is given by the examiner, if in a question examiner tells that all cash flows are subject to a particular rate of inflation, then both cash inflows as well as cash outflows should be adjusted for the rate of inflation. Not only the cash flows, you need to adjust discount rate also for inflation. So when you adjust discount rate for inflation, the adjusted discount rate is called as the nominal discount rate. Right. So another thing that you need to understand is there are three different types of cash flows when we do an investment appraisal. In the starting year or in year zero, we need to invest money for the project. So those cash flows are called as initial investments or initial cash outlays. Initial cash outlays or initial investments are incurred immediately. In other words, in year zero. After the initial investment, then in the subsequent years during the project lifetime, the company will generate cash flows. There can be cash inflows, there can be cash outflows. Most likely in those years during the project life, the company will generate positive cash flows. So these cash inflows and cash outflows are called as operational cash flows during the project life. Then when the project comes to the end, in the last year, the company will be able to realize remaining scrap value of the investment. In other words, after using a particular asset during the lifetime, when the project comes to the end, the company will be able to sell that asset in order to generate a scrap value. That is called as the terminal value of the project. That particular cash flow is normally received at the end of the project or in the last year of the project. So initial investment outlay, normally as I told you, initial investment of project or the initial capital value of a project is normally incurred immediately. In other words, in year zero. Year zero represents now, or it represents the immediate present. Supplemental operational cash flows, these are the cash flows which are generated by a project during the project lifetime. There can be cash inflows, cash outflows, and as I told you, most likely there will be positive operating cash flows during the project life. These cash flows, as I explained earlier, these cash flows we take after tax if the company is liable to pay tax. In other words, if the company is a tax-paying company, if there's a tax liability on the positive cash flows, then we take the cash flows of the project after tax. But if the question is silent about payment of tax, or if the company is free from tax, then there will not be a tax related cash flow. Then we take cash flow, cash inflows, cash outflows, or the net cash flows before tax. But if the company is liable to pay tax, then we have to take net cash flows after tax. Terminal cash flows. These are the cash flows which are normally realized at the end of the project or in the last year of the project after selling the remaining assets of the project. In other words, after using a particular asset for a project, when the project is over, that asset can be sold to realize the scrap value. The scrap value is called as the terminal value of the project. It is normally a cash inflow. So as I told you, there are two types of projects. This we have discussed earlier also. Some projects are replacement projects, some projects are expansion projects. Replacement projects are projects where we are going to replace an existing asset for the existing operations. Expansion projects are the projects where we are going to add additional machines to expand the operations. So when it comes to investment appraisal techniques, there are three main techniques which are called as net present value, internal rate of return, and the payback period. We can also calculate, going one step further, discounted payback, and also later we will see how we can do capital rationing in order to calculate profitability index. Okay, to explain the three capital investment appraisal techniques, net present value, internal rate of return, and payback period, I will take a simple example and I will work out this example in Microsoft Excel, also giving you an understanding about what these concepts mean. So I'll name it as illustration. To explain the three concepts, I'm going to use a very simple cash flow for a 5-year project. So since the project lifetime is 5 years, we need to start the cash flows with year 0. Year 0, as I told you, indicates the present. So let's say cash flows rupees million. I'm going to take a 5-year project where I'm going to put the cash flows as in year 0 minus 100, say year 130, 40, 45. So these are the cash flows. So now for these cash flows, I can calculate the net present value, internal rate of return, and also the payback period, and also the discounted payback period. So that is what we are going to discuss today. So here what we do first is, we have to first prepare the cash flow statement. Normally, when we do an investment appraisal, the best approach would be to put all the cash flows horizontally. So I'm going to put the number of years horizontally in this manner. Now I can put the cash flows. Same cash flows. I'm going to repeat here. So for these years, I have put the cash flows now. Since these cash flows are future cash flows, I need to convert these cash flows into present values. So to convert the future cash flows into present values, I need to have a discount rate. So I'm going to assume a discount rate of 10%. This is only for the illustration. I'm going to assume a discount rate of 10%. So using a discount rate of 10% and also based on the future cash flows, now I can calculate the present values. Present values. So for year 0, I will first calculate the discount factors. After that, I can calculate the present values. So to find the discount factors for year 0, I'm going to divide 1 by 1 plus discount rate to the power of 0. Now it is very important to understand how we calculate discount factors. The formula to calculate the discount factor is 1 divided by 1 plus discount rate, in this case 10%, to the power of n, to the power of n. So see the formula which I have applied here. I have taken 1. If you can look at the formula bar, you will see I have taken 1 as in this formula, 1 divided by 1 plus discount rate. Discount rate is 10% here, to the power of 0. So since the discount rate is a constant value in Microsoft Excel, what I will do is I will make that cell constant. Thereafter, to calculate the discount factors of other years, I will just extend that formula and change the n value. So for year 1, it will be 1, year 2, it will be 2, year 3, it will be 3, for year 4, it will be 4, and for year 5, it will be 5. So those are discount factors from year 1 to year 5. Now I can calculate the present values, that is cash flows into the relevant discount factors. So in year 0, cash flow is minus 100, discount factor is 1. In other words, year 0 means now there is no discounting of the cash flows. Therefore, the present value is also same as the cash flow. But in the future years, if you take year 1, the cash flow is given as 30. There's a discount factor. Discount factor is 0.909. Therefore, although the cash flow is 30, in other words, although we are going to get 30 million after 1 year, the present value of that 30 million is going to be less than 30 million because of discounting. So I can show it to you here. You will see, although we are going to get 30 million after year 1, since there's a discount factor of 0.909, the present value of this 30 million is 27.27. In the same way, after 2 years, we are going to get 40 million. However, since that cash flow is going to happen after 2 years, there's a discounting factor of 0.826. As a result, the present value of 40 million that we are going to get after 2 years is 33.05. In other words, as we go on, the discount factor is going to reduce. Since the discount factor is going to reduce, the present value of the future values are going to reduce. In other words, for each passing year, discount factor is going to be less than the previous discount factor. You can see in year 1, discount factor 0.909 is less than year 0 discount factor of 1. Year 2 discount factor 0.826 is less than the discount factor of year 1. So in this way, as we go on, in each year we'll have a lesser figure for the discount factor, which means the present value of the cash flows is going to be less. So you can see here, year 2 we are going to get 40 million. Year 2 we are going to get 40 million. Of that, present value is 33.05. And in year 5 also we are going to get 40 million. but of that 40 million, present value is 24.84. In other words, if you concentrate on year 2 and year 5, in both years, we are going to have the same cash flow, which is 40 million. Although the cash flow is same, you can see year 2 present value is much higher than year 5 present value. This is simply due to year 2 having a higher discount factor than year 5. In year 2, discount factor is 0.826. In year 5, discount factor is 0.621. In other words, in 5th year, discount factor is less than the discount factor of year 2. Therefore, even though in both years we have the same cash flow, year 2 present value is much higher than year 5 present value. So now, based on discount factors, we have calculated the present values. Net present value. Net present value is therefore going to be the sum of the present values. Now the meaning of net present value. See the 3 words, net present value. The meaning of net present value is the sum of the present values. Sum of the present values from year 0. In our calculation, we have calculated the present values from year 0. So net present value simply means the total of the present values from year 0. So I can put here NPV equals sum. Sum means the total of this row. Total of the present values. So you can see net present value is 53.12. Now you have to understand the meaning of this NPV. How we calculated this NPV, we took the sum of the present values. In other words, we took the total of the present values from year 0 to year 5. If you look at these present values, you will see in year 0, there's a negative cash flow. If you look at these present values, I'm referring to these values. If you look at these present values in year 0, there's a negative present value. And in the other years, there are positive present values. In other words, I can identify 2 parts in this NPV value. I'll explain it like this. In this NPV value of 53.12, there are 2 components. First component is initial investment. Initial investment. Now, as we know, initial investment is minus 100. Then we have the second component, present value of future cash flows. Present value of future cash flows. Now, present value of future cash flows is the total of present values beginning from year 1. I repeat. In this NPV value of 53.12, there are 2 components. This NPV is the total of present values from year 0 to year 5. However, when we calculate this net present value of 53.12, that is actually coming from the total of 2 parts. In other words, the sum of present values from year 0 to year 5 here, I can split into 2 components. My 2 components would be initial investment, that is the present value in year 0, present value of year 0, and the sum of the present values from year 1 to year 5. That is the total of the present values from year 1 to year 5, that is 153.12. This is the sum of present values from year 1 to year 5. So basically what I am saying here is, my initial investment is 100 million or minus 100. After investing 100 million, I am going to get future cash flows, of which present value is 153 million. I repeat, My initial investment or year zero investment is 100 million or minus 100. After investing 100 million, I am going to get future cash flows of which present value is 153. In other words, this is as same as saying today I am spending 100 and also in today I am going to receive 153. Now, why I am saying I am going to receive 153 today? Because all the future cash flows we have converted to present value. When we convert future cash flows to present values, we are expressing in today's terms. So this NPV of 53 is same as saying today I am spending 100 million and today I am going to receive 153 million. So after spending 100 million, if you are going to get 153 million, you are going to benefit immediately by 53 million. Therefore, if the NPV is positive, now in this case, NPV is positive by 53 million. If the NPV is positive, it means the company is going to benefit immediately by undertaking this project. Therefore, if the NPV is positive, the company should immediately accept the project. I repeat, if the NPV is positive, it means in today's terms, you are going to immediately benefit. Therefore, if the NPV is positive, you have to immediately accept the project. At the same time, if the NPV is negative, you have to forget the project. In other words, you should not undertake the project. Now for the same example, we can calculate the internal rate of return. So I have named this sheet as NPV. I'll go to the next sheet. I'll name it as IRR, internal rate of return. I'm going to take the same cash flows in order to calculate the internal rate of return. Right. So internal rate of return of a project means the rate of return based on the discounted cash flows. In other words, in order to calculate the internal rate of return or the return internally generated by the project based on the discounted cash flows, we need to calculate two NPVs at two discount rates. You know, to calculate a NPV, we need to have a discount rate. Already we have one NPV calculated at 10%. To calculate IRR, we need two NPVs at two discount rates. Therefore, we need to calculate another NPV at a different discount rate. Normally, when we calculate IRR, it is customary for us to use a positive NPV and a negative NPV. Already we know when the discount rate is 10%, NPV is positive 53. So since we have a positive NPV, now we need to take a negative NPV. So to have a negative NPV for this cash flow, to have a negative NPV for this cash flow, we have to use a higher discount rate, a much higher discount rate than 10%. At 10%, it was positive 53. To apply the IRR formula, we have to have a negative NPV. So to find that negative NPV, we have to guess a discount rate. Now this guessing discount rate has to be a discount rate much higher than 10% because when the discount rate goes up, present values are going to reduce and the NPV can become a negative NPV. Therefore, we are going to estimate a discount rate in order to calculate a NPV. Hopefully that NPV would be a negative NPV. So I'm going to put the already calculated NPV at 10% here. When the discount rate was 10%, we know the NPV, which was 53.12. So expecting a negative NPV, I'm going to apply a much higher discount rate. So let me assume a discount rate of 30%. So for 30%, I can calculate the discount factors now. This is the same formula, 1 divided by 1 plus, now the new discount rate. that I'm going to make constant to the power of 0. So for the rest of the years, I'm going to change that power factor. Here to the power of 1, power of 2, power of 3, power of 4, and power of 5. So I have the cash flows, future cash flows, discount factors. Now I can calculate the present values. So present values are cash flows multiplied by discount factors. I can extend that. So I can now calculate the NPV, which is the sum of the present values. Total of the present values. So as expected at 30%, it was minus 4.49. Now I have a positive NPV and a negative NPV for the two different rates. So now I can apply the internal rate of return formula, IRR formula. IRR formula, I write it here, lower discount rate plus, we open the bracket, NPV at lower rate divide by, open brackets, NPV at lower rate minus NPV at higher rate. So close bracket, then I close the main bracket into higher rate, higher discount rate minus lower discount rate. Let's apply the figures now. So lower discount rate is 10%, so 10% plus. NPV at the lower rate, the positive NPV, that divide by, open bracket, again the same NPV minus NPV at a higher rate into higher rate minus lower rate. So IRR is 28.44%. It's a percentage, 28.44%. So you can look at the formula, lower discount rate plus NPV at lower rate divide by, then within the bracket, NPV at lower rate minus NPV at higher rate, close the denominator bracket and close the main bracket. Then multiplied by, again open brackets, higher discount rate minus lower discount rate. So you can see we have applied the figures based on these four values. So IRR of the company is 28.44. In other words, what this means is this. You will see from the two discount rates, at 10% NPV was positive, at 30% it was minus 4.49. So this 28.44% means when the discount rate is 28.44%, NPV of the project is 0. In other words, discount rate at which NPV is 0 is 28.44. Therefore, internal rate of return is the discount rate at which NPV is going to be 0. So at 28.44%, if you discount the cash flows by 28.44%, NPV would be 0. That is the meaning of internal rate of return. Right. So in this particular question, discount rate was 10%. At 10% NPV we know 53.12, and internal rate of return, just now we calculated 28.44. I'm going to explain you an interesting relationship. As you can see here, when the discount rate was 10%, there was a positive NPV. And for the same project, the IRR was 28.44%. So this is the relationship between NPV and IRR. If NPV is positive for a particular discount rate, I repeat, if NPV is positive for a particular discount rate, in that project, IRR is more than discount rate. I repeat here, if NPV is positive for a particular discount rate, IRR is going to be more than discount. You can see here, discount rate was 10%. At that discount rate, NPV was 53.12 and IRR is 28.44. So at 10% NPV is positive. Again, we are saying IRR is more than the discount rate. So we can say here, if NPV is positive, IRR is more than the discount rate. Therefore, we have to accept the projects which have positive NPVs or the projects of which IRR is greater than the discount rate. I repeat, when we are accepting projects, we can accept the projects either based on the NPV rule or IRR rule. Both methods will come to the same conclusion, or both methods will say the same point. Here, since the NPV is positive, we are saying the project can be accepted because immediately the company is going to benefit by 53 million. Therefore, if the NPV is positive, we have to accept the project. At the same time, we are saying the internal rate of return, the return of the project is more than the discount rate. That is obvious. At 10%, NPV is 53. When the discount rate is 28.44, NPV is going to be 0. Therefore, in that particular project, in the project that we have chosen for the example, IRR is more than the discount rate. Therefore, ultimately, when we are selecting projects based on the NPV rule, we have to look at the positive or negative value of the NPV. If it is positive, yes, you have to accept the project. But when you are selecting projects based on the IRR rule, you have to compare IRR with the discount rate. And if the IRR is more than the discount rate, then you have to accept the projects. If IRR is more than the discount rate, it means NPV is positive. So this is the conclusion. Therefore, we have to accept the projects which have positive NPVs, which means in those projects, IRR is more than the discount rate. So this is the relationship between NPV and IRR. So for the same example, now I can calculate the payback. So to calculate the payback, I'll name this as payback. To calculate the payback, I'm not going to discount the cash flows. Remember, when we calculate the payback, normal payback, we are not going to discount the cash flows. We are going to calculate the payback based on the undiscounted cash flows. So these are undiscounted cash flows or cash flows before discounting. Based on these cash flows, I'm going to have another row below the cash flows called cumulative cash flows. Cumulative cash flows. So I can now calculate the cumulative cash flows. We are starting with minus 100. At the end of year 1, we are generating plus 30. So the start in minus 100 has now reduced to minus 70. And in this way, I can extend. So when I extend like this, you will see here, by the time I come to the end of year 3, not end of year 2, by the time I come to the end of year 3, my cumulative cash flow has become positive. In other words, the project has paid back. We have started the project with an investment of 100 million, and before the end of third year, we have recovered the initial investment. By end of year 3, cumulative cash flows has become a positive value. In other words, before the end of year 3, we have recovered the initial investment of the project. As a result, we can calculate the payback period like this. We know exactly the payback period is more than 2 years. In other words, the project paid back, or we recovered the initial investment before the third year, but after the second year. So we can say payback period is 2 years. Plus, to this we need to add. At the end of year 2, to recover the initial investment, we needed further 30. You can see in the cumulative cash flow column, in the cumulative cash flow row, at the end of year 2, it is still minus 30. In other words, we had to recover 30 million more. We are recovering this 30 million from the third year's cash flow. So third year's cash flow is 45 million. So we have to recover 30 million. By end of year 2, we have to recover 30 million. That 30 million we are going to recover from year 3 cash flows. Year 3 cash flow is 45 million. So we have to recover 30 out of 45 million, which represents 8 months. Which represents 8 months. So to get the number of months, I have multiplied by 12. So I repeat here. Payback period is definitely more than 2 years, because at the end of year 2, we had to recover another 30 million. So I can safely say payback period is more than 2 years. To calculate the exact number of months from the third year, what I am doing is, I am taking the cash flow which we had to recover at the end of year 2, which is 30 million, out of the third year's cash flow. Third year's cash flow is 45 million. So end of year 2, we had to recover 30 out of third year's 45. So 30 out of 45, in terms of number of months, 8 months. So my payback period is 2 years. This is number of months. My payback period is 2 years and 8 months. 2 years and 8 months. Without expressing using number of months, I can also say, I know it is more than 2, so I have to recover 30 end of year 2 out of third year's 45. So it is 0.66667. So I can say payback period in terms of decimals, 2.67 years. 7 years. So I repeat that. What I did here is, in this calculation, I calculated the payback in exact number of months. So in exact number of months, payback is 2 years and 8 months. Why 2 years and 8 months? It is more than 2 years definitely. End of year 2, we have to recover 30. Out of 30 is 45. So 30 out of 45 multiplied by 12, it is exactly 8 months. So exact payback period in terms of years and months is 2 years and 8 months. Without expressing in number of months, I can express payback as number of years. So if I'm expressing payback as number of years, it is definitely more than 2 years. In order to get the decimal value from the third year, I'm just dividing 30, which I had to recover at the end of year 2, by the third year's cash flow, which is 45. So in terms of years, it is 2.67 years. So both answers are correct. In the exam, both answers are correct. Whether you express the answer in years and months, 2 years and 8 months, or whether you express the answer in years as 2.67, both answers will be recognized as correct answers. So this is how you calculate the payback period. Payback is the period within which you can recover the initial investment. If the payback is shorter, is much better for the company, because if the payback is shorter, it means the company can recover the initial investment faster and the project's risk is less. So now we'll move into a slight variation to normal payback, which is discounted payback. Discounted payback. So I'm going to use the same example. Now in discounted payback, the only difference is compared to normal payback, I am going to discount the cash flows using the discount rate. Now in this example, discount rate is 10%. So earlier we have calculated discount factors. I'm going to take the same discount factors from the NPV calculation. Same discount factors at the rate of 10%. So that doesn't change. I mean, we have taken that from the first calculation, NPV calculation. So discount factors at 10%. 10% is the rate. At 10%, these are discount factors. So since we have the cash flows and discount factors, we can calculate the present values like in the NPV calculation. So present values are cash flows multiplied by discount factors. So these are my present values. Now the difference is in discounted payback, we calculate the payback period not based on the original cash flows, but based on the present values. So here I am going to have another row, cumulative present values. Cumulative present values in order to calculate the discounted payback. So cumulative present values, year 0 present value is minus 100. Then year 1 present value would be, year 1 cumulative present value would be minus 100 plus year 1 present value. So year 1 cumulative present value is minus 72. So likewise, I can continue. So you will see now, cumulative present value becomes a positive value before the end of year 4. But even after the end of year 3, even at the end of year 3, cumulative present value is a negative value, which means even at the end of year 3, we have not reached the discounted payback. We have reached the discounted payback after passing year 3. So how we are going to calculate the exact discounted payback value? Discounted payback. Now here also we can calculate either in years and months or simply in years. So I know definitely my discounted payback is more than 3 years since I haven't reached the 0 point in the cumulative present value even at the end of year 3. So I can say here it is more than 3 years. 3 years plus so let's say I'm saying here 3 years. 3 years plus. Then at the end of year 3, I have to recover 5 point. I'll take without the minus value. I have to recover 5.86 out of year 4's present value. So if I want to express the answer in months, I will multiply this by 12. So exactly I can say 3 years and 2.06 months. This is one way of getting the answer. It is definitely more than 3 years. My discounted payback is definitely more than 3 years, since even at the end of year 3, I haven't reached the 0 value in the cumulative present value row. So it is more than 3 years. If I want to calculate the number of months from the 4th year, what I do is I take the amount to be recovered in the cumulative present value row at the end of year 3, that is 5.86 out of year 4's present value, and I multiply that by 12 in order to get the number of months. So I get the answer 3 years and 2.06 months. Now the same I can express in years. I can say 3 years plus I can simply take how much I had to recover at the end of year 3, that is 5.86 out of year 4's present value. By adding both, I can say it is 3.1716 years. 3.1716 years. I'll explain that again. Like the normal payback, here also you can calculate discounted payback either in years and months or simply in years. If you want to calculate the number of months, then you multiply it by 12. If you don't want months and if you want to express the answer only in years, you take the calculation out multiplying by 12. In other words, we know the discounted payback is definitely more than 3 years. So it is 3 years plus something. So this additional part, we can either calculate as the present value that we had to recover at the end of year 3 out of the present value from year 4. That we can multiply by 12 if you want the answer in months, or if you don't want the answer in months, in other words, if you prefer the answer in years only, you can take the present value to be recovered at the end of year 3 out of the present value of year 4 without multiplying by 12. So like the normal payback, in discounted payback also both answers are correct. Both answers will be accepted. So in the discounted payback, like in the normal payback, the shorter the discounted payback is much better, since if the discounted payback is shorter, it means the company's risk or the riskiness in the cash flows is lower. Sooner you can recover the initial investment either from the discounted payback or from the normal payback, the project will be considered as less risky. The only advantage in discounted payback compared to normal payback is both calculate the project risk. The shorter the payback is better for both. In the discounted payback calculation, the only advantage compared to normal payback is the consideration of the present values. In other words, we calculate the normal payback without taking the present values or simply by taking the future cash flows, which is not very accurate. In the discounted payback, we calculate the payback by taking into account the present values of the future cash flows. Therefore, in terms of the accuracy, discounted payback is ranked much higher than the normal payback. So today we have discussed 4 investment appraisal techniques, 4 basic techniques, but these techniques are tested frequently in examination questions, both at the operational level as well as at the managerial level. So the 4 techniques are net present value, or what we call as NPV, internal rate of return, IRR, normal payback, and discounted payback. So with this, we'll finish today's discussion. And if you have any questions, you can raise questions through the CMA virtual learning platform, or you can direct questions to me personally or through the email addresses provided. Thank you very much.